After decades in the spotlight, Juanita Bynum is finally breaking her silence, and the documents she's holding could change everything we thought we knew about Gino Jennings. What she revealed stunned the faith community, and insiders say this is just the beginning. You won't believe what comes next. For years, Juanita Bynum and Gino Jennings have been two of the most talked about figures in the world of gospel and ministry. But behind the sermons, the appearances, and the public statements, a story was quietly unfolding, one that very few have ever seen. At 61, Juanita decided it was time to confront Gino Jennings directly. And she didn't come empty-handed. Hidden documents, long kept away from public view, have surfaced, documents that insiders say could rewrite the narrative we thought we knew. In this video, we're going deep. We'll uncover the rare details, the insider accounts, and the shocking moments from their confrontation. From behind-the-scenes tensions to revelations that no one saw coming, this is a story about power, faith, and the truths people often try to hide. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this confrontation is making headlines and why the faith community won't stop talking about it. This is where it gets unbelievable. To understand why this confrontation shook the faith community, we need to go back decades. Juanita Bynum is no stranger to controversy. From her early rise as a gospel singer and ministry leader to her public appearances on national platforms, she has always commanded attention. Known for her outspoken nature, she has inspired millions, but also drawn criticism for her candid approach to church leadership and personal revelations. On the other side, Gino Jennings has been one of the most polarizing figures in modern ministry. His strict interpretations, fiery sermons, and no-nonsense leadership style have both captivated followers and alienated critics. For years, his ministry grew quietly but steadily, gaining a loyal following that respects his uncompromising faith stance. What most people didn't realize is that their paths had long been intertwined. Behind closed doors, rumors, whispered accounts, and private correspondences suggested tensions that were never publicly addressed, until now. And at 61, Juanita Bynum decided it was time to confront Jennings, not with words alone, but with proof. But the journey that led her to this moment wasn't simple. Years of ministry battles, power struggles, and hidden documents had been quietly accumulating, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And that moment came in a confrontation that would leave insiders stunned. What exactly did these documents contain? And why did Juanita feel compelled to reveal them now? The answers lie in the shocking details that follow. But what happened next changed everything. The day of the confrontation was anything but ordinary. According to insiders, the atmosphere was tense from the very beginning. Juanita Bynum, known for her confidence and unwavering presence, arrived prepared not just to speak, but to reveal truths that had been kept in the shadows for years. The documents she brought with her weren't ordinary papers. These were detailed records, emails, correspondence, and internal ministry documents that reportedly outlined decisions, communications, and actions that many within the faith community had never seen. Each page seemed to tell a story of power struggles, mismanagement, and disputed authority. As she laid the documents on the table, the room went silent. Those present described a moment where time seemed to pause. Every eye was fixed on Juanita as she began to speak, not in anger, but in a calm, deliberate tone that carried years of experience and wisdom. The gravity of the revelations started to sink in. According to multiple accounts, some of the documents challenged public narratives that Gino Jennings had carefully cultivated over the years. Details that were once private, decisions about ministry leadership, financial accountability, and correspondence with key figures, were suddenly in the open. And as Juanita presented her evidence, the reactions varied. Some were shocked, others visibly uncomfortable, and a few appeared as if they had suspected something, but never had proof. But perhaps the most dramatic moment came when Juanita revealed a series of letters and recordings that hinted at conflicts no one outside their inner circle had ever known. These weren't just administrative issues. They touched on matters of faith, ethics, and the very foundation of leadership within the ministry. Insiders say that for a moment, Jennings seemed caught off guard. His typically commanding presence appeared strained as the documents were systematically laid out. Yet, the confrontation was not just about accusations. It was about truth. Juanita's goal, according to sources, was not to shame but to expose the reality that had been carefully concealed. And just when it seemed the room had reached its peak tension, Juanita dropped a revelation that no one expected. a document previously thought lost, directly contradicted a public statement made by Jennings years earlier, a statement that had shaped the perceptions of thousands of followers. The shockwaves were immediate. Even those who had long admired both leaders admitted they hadn't anticipated this level of transparency. But this wasn't the end. As the confrontation continued, new revelations kept emerging, each one adding a layer of complexity and suspense. What Juanita revealed next would forever change how the ministry and its followers viewed its leadership. What she had in hand was more than proof. It was a catalyst for truth. And for everyone in that room, and soon for the world watching, it became clear that nothing would ever be the same again. The moment Juanita Bynum's confrontation with Gino Jennings became known beyond that room, the ripple effects were immediate and dramatic. Social media erupted almost instantly. Faith communities, ministry followers, and observers from around the globe began dissecting every detail, every revelation, and every document. The questions were everywhere. What did these papers really show? How much of what we thought we knew was true? For years, both Juanita and Gino had cultivated massive followings. Each had their loyal supporters who would defend them vehemently. But now, the narrative was shifting. Some followers expressed disbelief, struggling to reconcile the evidence with the image of their spiritual leaders. Others felt vindicated, as rumors and speculations they had quietly discussed behind closed doors suddenly had proof attached. Within the ministry world itself, insiders described a storm of whispered conversations, secret meetings, and tense phone calls. Leaders who had once worked closely with Jennings were forced to reevaluate their trust and affiliations. Church boards, ministry partners, and even media outlets covering gospel news scrambled to understand the full scope of what had been revealed. The emotional toll was just as significant. Many members of the congregation reportedly felt betrayed and confused, grappling with the realization that decisions they had trusted for years were now being questioned. Yet for others, Juanita's boldness was a rallying cry, a reminder that accountability and transparency are not just ideals, but necessities for anyone in a position of spiritual authority. Perhaps one of the most shocking reactions came from those closest to the leaders themselves. Friends and associates who had long operated behind the scenes spoke of tension and quiet unrest leading up to the confrontation. Some had tried to warn both parties, others had stayed silent, and now, suddenly, the truth was out in the open. The emotional impact was profound. Public commentary ranged from praise for Juanita's courage to heated criticism questioning motives, creating a swirl of debate that only intensified as clips, statements, and leaked documents circulated online. News platforms covering gospel events described the situation as unprecedented, highlighting how rare it is for two prominent figures to engage in such a direct, evidence-driven confrontation. Even more intriguing, insiders hinted that Juanita's revelation was just the first wave. The documents she shared opened the door for deeper investigations, conversations, and scrutiny. It was as if one small action, placing those papers on a table, had unleashed a storm that could not be contained. The confrontation wasn't just about two leaders. It was about the larger conversation surrounding leadership, integrity, and accountability in ministry. And as this story continued to unfold, it became increasingly clear. The impact would reach far beyond the individuals involved. But what happened after the initial shock? How did Gino Jennings respond once the reality of the documents truly sank in? And what private conversations happened behind closed doors in the days that followed? The answers reveal even more about the complex web of faith, power, and truth that this confrontation exposed. After the confrontation, all eyes turned to Gino Jennings. How would one of the most steadfast and commanding figures in modern ministry respond when faced with undeniable evidence? Sources close to the situation revealed that Jennings retreated into a period of intense reflection, gathering his closest advisors and ministers to review the documents Juanita had presented. Insiders described the scene as tense and emotionally charged. Jennings, known for his unshakable confidence, reportedly spent hours examining every page, cross-referencing the materials with public records and internal communications. For the first time in many years, there were moments when his usually decisive demeanor seemed uncertain. Observers noted that even the most loyal supporters began questioning certain actions and statements that, until now, had gone unquestioned. Word of his private response slowly leaked. In conversations behind closed doors, Jennings reportedly admitted that some of the information in Juanita's documents was accurate, acknowledging errors, miscommunications, and decisions that could have been handled differently. At the same time, he defended parts of his ministry and choices, emphasizing his intent to serve his congregation faithfully. But the most startling aspect was the human side of Jennings that few had ever seen. Insiders spoke of moments of vulnerability, reflection, and even remorse. While his public persona is often fierce and unyielding, the confrontation had cracked the surface, revealing a man grappling with accountability in a very real, very human way. Meanwhile, Juanita Bynum's actions sparked wider discussions across the faith community. Many applauded her courage, emphasizing that transparency and truth should always be prioritized, no matter how uncomfortable the revelations might be. Others debated her timing, motives, and approach, leading to passionate discussions on social media, in private message groups, and during community gatherings. The aftermath wasn't limited to private reflection. According to insiders, Jennings initiated a series of meetings with key ministry leaders, aiming to address concerns raised by the documents. There were discussions about financial oversight, leadership structure, and communication strategies, issues that had long been simmering beneath the surface. This period of reassessment highlighted the undeniable power of Juanita's intervention. A single act of courage had prompted a ripple effect that reached every corner of the ministry. But the story didn't stop there. Rumors circulated that the documents contained additional layers of information, details that could have implications beyond the immediate confrontation. Some sources suggested that these revelations might influence other prominent figures in ministry, creating a chain reaction of accountability and scrutiny. For followers of both Juanita and Jennings, this was more than a headline. It was a moment that challenged perceptions, beliefs, and loyalties. It raised essential questions about leadership in the church. How much do congregations really know? And what happens when hidden truths finally come to light? And just when the community thought they had absorbed the full impact, another revelation emerged. A portion of the documents, previously overlooked, hinted at ongoing negotiations and undisclosed communications that could alter the narrative once again. The suspense was far from over. What Juanita had started was a process, not a conclusion, and it was becoming clear that this story was only beginning to unfold in ways no one could have predicted. The confrontation between Juanita Bynum and Gino Jennings didn't just end with documents on a table or private acknowledgments behind closed doors. Its impact rippled through the faith community in ways that continue to resonate today. For many, this was a wake-up call, a reminder that leadership is never above scrutiny and that transparency is not optional but essential. Faith leaders across the country began to reflect on what had transpired. Some praised Juanita for her courage, citing her actions as a blueprint for accountability within ministry. Others took a more cautious stance, questioning whether public confrontations were always the best method of addressing internal disputes. But one thing was undeniable. The conversation about integrity, truth, and leadership accountability had been reignited in a way that few could ignore. For congregants, the confrontation raised profound personal questions. Many began to examine the relationship between trust and faith, pondering how much they knew, or didn't know, about the leaders they had long admired. Discussions in homes, church halls, and online forums were no longer hypothetical. People were asking hard questions. How transparent should our leaders be? How do we reconcile faith with human imperfection? And, perhaps most importantly, what happens when hidden truths finally surface? The documents themselves became a focal point of debate. They were not just evidence, they were symbols of accountability and proof that no matter how powerful or charismatic a leader might be, actions and decisions are always subject to scrutiny. For some, the revelations were shocking enough to spark deep soul-searching. For others, they validated suspicions that had long existed but never had evidence to support them. Even within the broader ministry world, the confrontation left a lasting mark. Leaders who once felt untouchable were reminded that their decisions carry weight, not just within the walls of their institutions, but in the hearts and minds of their followers. Conversations about governance, transparency, and ethical responsibility surged to the forefront of church leadership discussions. In many ways, Juanita's actions served as a catalyst for systemic reflection, a rare moment where one courageous act forced an entire network to examine itself. And yet, the story continues to unfold. Insiders hint that additional documents and testimonies may surface in the coming months, potentially reshaping the narrative once more. This ongoing process underscores the reality that confrontations like these are rarely about a single event. They are about long-term consequences, lessons learned, and the enduring power of truth. Ultimately, the confrontation between Juanita Bynum and Gino Jennings is a story about courage, accountability, and the human complexities of faith leadership. It challenges assumptions, sparks dialogue, and reminds everyone watching that no one is above the light of scrutiny. The faith community has been shaken, yes, but it has also been awakened to the necessity of transparency, the importance of integrity, and the undeniable truth that real leadership requires more than charisma. It demands responsibility, honesty, and courage.